When I was a kid, I used to watch movies, TV shows, read martial arts magazines, and where martial artists would claim these hands or these feet are registered with the local police department as deadly weapons. And I always thought back in the 70s, I was like, man, one day I'm gonna be a black belt and I'm gonna have to register my hands and feet with the local police department as deadly weapons. Well, this came up as a question of the week this week. So I am al-Aziz, the owner and head instructor of Semper Fortis jiu-jitsu here in San Antonio, Texas. And this week's question of the week is, do black belts have to register their hands and/or feet with the local police department as deadly weapons? And it came up because I promoted one of our students to black belt this week, and somebody had made the comment, oh, well, now, you're gonna have to go to the local police department and register your hands as deadly weapons. And I thought that was funny. I got a good laugh out of it. I hadn't heard anybody say that in years. And I was like, man, that's gonna be a good question of the week. I'm gonna tackle this. And so I started to do a little research, got on Google. Google is your friend. Like, I am so envious of today's generation. Like, in the 70s, if I wanted to find an answer to a question, I would have to go to the library. I'd have to look up maybe some encyclopedias. And man, good luck finding some answers. Where today, man, you just type into Google, and Google will start popping up answers. And had you asked me before I typed this into Google, I would have been like, that's 100% false. However, I typed it into Google, and Google started giving me some information. And to my surprise, it's not 100% false. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, in all 50 states, it's 100% false. I could find nothing where any law indicated that you had to go to the local police department and register your hands or feet or both as weapons. Because like Texas, for example, you don't even register your firearms or your knives or your swords or your rifles, your spears, your bow and arrows, your crossbows, whatever you got. You don't even register those with the local law enforcement as deadly weapons. So why would you have to register your hands or feet? So I would have said that was an absolute myth. But Google led me to the island of Guam. And turns out in Guam, I couldn't tell whether it's still a current ordinance, but at one time it was an ordinance that black belts in karate, in judo, or martial arts similar to those two do have to register their hands with local law enforcement. And you can do so for a grand total of $5. And I am totally fascinated as to what the history or what the motivation was that would have caused, the island of Guam to do this. But I would have said, prior to looking it up, this rumor is absolutely false. This is one of those urban legends. And it is everywhere else in America, with the exception of Guam. And you say, well, Guam, it's an island. Is that America? It's like, yes, it absolutely is. Part of the United States. It's one of the U.S. territories. So you could find yourself in Guam, because there's a large Air Force base in Guam. There's also a naval hospital in Guam. So some of my military guys could very well find themselves in Guam. But like I said, when I looked it up, I couldn't quite determine whether it was still in effect or at one time it was in effect. But I was really shocked that there was some truth to this urban legend. Because maybe that's where all these martial arts legends came from. Because originally, I think it came from boxing. Because Joe Louis, one of his promotional things that he would do is before his fights, he claimed his hands were deadly weapons. And if you ever saw Joe Louis box, old videos of him boxing, he had a good case. He was an amazing boxer. And so one of the promotional gimmicks they would do is before his fights, they would have a couple local police officers come in and inspect his hands. And the whole gimmick was, the police had to inspect his hands because they were deadly weapons, before he got ready to box. And that there may have been other boxers that did that, but he was the first one that I could find that did that. And I think that's where the other martial artists tried to pick that up and make that part of their promotion. It's like, yeah, my hands are registered as deadly weapons. I'm pretty sure Bruce Lee said it in a movie one time. I know I saw other martial artists, say it in movies and TV shows. And, like when I was a kid, I thought, man, one day I'm going to get a black belt and I have to register as my hands as deadly weapons. And turns out, no, never had to register my hands as deadly weapons. And, but that's the history of this urban legend. It's a myth everywhere else in America, with the exception of the island of Guam. And like I said, I wasn't able to verify whether that's still currently in effect on Guam or if at one point it was in effect. But if you ever find yourself on the island of Guam and you're a black belt in some martial art, you may have to go down and register and pay $5 and register your hands and or feet as deadly weapons. So that's the answer to this week's question of the week. If anybody watching this video from Guam, if you could make a comment and just sort of enlighten us as to whether this is still in effect or maybe what you know about the history of it, I would be fascinated to hear your input. And because I think that's just really cool. I did not think, until I started looking up on Google, I did not think that would be in effect anywhere. I thought it was a pure urban legend until Google said, no, in Guam, it is a fact. So fascinating, fascinating. All right, if you got a question for next week, feel free to fire below. And as always, I'll do my best to give you my best answer. So till then, ciao.